Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Malice in the Mitten. I am your host, Tracy Preston, along with my bestie, Christine Mulligan. Hey, Christine.
Hey, Trace. Hey, everybody. What are we going to get into today?
Well, today's story begins with a teenage pregnancy, an adoption, and 14 years later, a missing person. This is a mother's worst nightmare. So, let's get into it. This is Season 3, Episode 17, Aundria Michelle Bowman. So I need to give credit for this story to my bestie Christine Mulligan and her wife Nina. They had watched a 2-part series and told me that I had to watch it. It was a Michigan-based murder, and this story is just crazy. So I did watch it, and I was just blown away. I have never heard of this heartbreaking story. It took place in 1989, the year I graduated from high school. The 2-part series is currently on Netflix. It is also the main source for the show, and it is called Into the Fire, The Lost Daughter. The series begins with Kathy and her husband, Edward, sitting next to a bonfire. She said, quote, "This story is not about me. This is about a missing child. My missing child. All my life I was looking for her, but I didn't know what happened to her. She just disappeared. It's been a long, difficult journey because here's the thing. My daughter's case, it wasn't unsolved. It was uninvestigated, and that enraged me. But anger is a motivator. I got to the point that I've got to find this kid alive, and I don't care if I have to walk all over God's green earth to do it. If you can't run on anything else, you can run on anger. It doesn't need to be fed. It doesn't need to sleep. It might kill you, but if you want to get something done, get good and angry. There's going to be an answer to this, and I'm going to find her." This is the story of Kathy Turkanian and her search to find her daughter. So we're going to dial it back a little bit to find out who Kathy was and why she was searching. Kathy was working as a nurse in New Orleans at the time she met Edward, who she is currently married to. It was 1991. Kathy said they had met the good old-fashioned way in a bar with a big old grin on her face. They connected, had a great night of conversation. They thought they would never see one another again, but fate had other plans. Just a few days after they met, they ran into one another again, and from that moment on, they have been inseparable. Kathy ended up quitting her job as a nurse, packed up everything she owned in a U-Haul, and she, Edward, and her dog hit the road for Massachusetts, where Ed had a home. The two knew that they were meant to be and decided to get married. They had gone down to West Virginia and were married in quick order in a chapel at the University of West Virginia just 10 weeks after meeting one another. At the time the series on Netflix was made, which was in 2024, it had been 32 years that this couple had been married. Sometimes you just know when you have met your soulmate. Approximately a month after the couple had wed, Kathy told her husband that she had been pregnant when she was a teenager and that she had a baby girl but had given the infant up for adoption at the behest of her parents. Well, more like her mother. Kathy said that everything was becoming very real to her after she had given birth to her daughter. She quickly realized that she was going to have to be the one to change diapers, feed the baby, and teach the baby everything she would need to know. She would have to do all the adult things that she, as a child, just didn't know or realize before giving birth. I mean, she was just a teenager. She was 16 years old. I can only imagine the godsmack that was for her. This is when Kathy's mother basically cornered her and said, "Listen, you don't know what you're doing. You need to give this baby up for adoption." Her mother just wouldn't let up. She continuously told Kathy that her child needed the best chance of getting the best life, that her baby would have everything she needed, not only love, but a good home where she would have the best hope at succeeding in life. Well, her mother got into her head, and Kathy said, quote, "If there's anything I can do for my baby, this was it." She deserves this. At this time, Kathy was living in Norfolk, Virginia with her parents, and this is where she had put her baby up for adoption. Kathy has never forgiven herself for following her parents' wishes. Kathy said that her daughter was the prettiest baby she had ever seen. Now, on the show, there were many pictures of this sweet little baby, and I can attest that she was super cute, bald as can be, big baby fat cheeks, and the most beautiful blue-green eyes. Kathy named her daughter Alexis Miranda Badger. She was born in June of 1974. From the day Kathy gave up her child, she has never stopped thinking of her. Now, her child was in something called a closed adoption. Now, per Wikipedia, a closed adoption, which is also called a confidential adoption, and sometimes secret adoption, is a process by which an infant is adopted by another family, and the record of the biological parent or parents is kept sealed. Often the biological father is not even recorded, even on the original birth certificate. Alexis was only 9 months old when she was given up for adoption. All Kathy could do is wait and hope that her daughter would someday come looking for her. But that day never happened. It was March 12, 2010, when Kathy received a letter from the adoption agency. She was super excited. She thought that the day had finally arrived. Her daughter was trying to locate her. But no, it wasn't that type of letter. As she continued to read, she learned that her daughter had gone missing in 1989. At that time, her daughter was 14 years old. The letter went on to say that they had found an unidentified body next to a cornfield in Wisconsin that could possibly be her daughter's body. God, could you even imagine? As she continued to read, she learned that a detective had contacted the adoption agency about the Jane Doe and that they needed Kathy's DNA to see if Jane Doe could possibly be Kathy's daughter. So with a heavy heart, she gave her DNA and patiently waited. Kathy reached out to the adoption agency and the detective, but they wouldn't tell her what her daughter's adopted name was. Like, for crying out loud already, you can't give this woman a freaking name? She's been missing for 21 years at this point. Why in the world would they withhold the name of her daughter?
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense at all. It was, I don't really want to stop your flow here, but this woman did get, smacked in the face at every turn throughout this whole process. The biological mother, I'm saying. She really couldn't get anywhere in any information, but she just kept going, and they really, I don't know. I don't want to get too involved yet.
I would also like to point out that because Kathy had given her daughter up for adoption, she really didn't have any standing, no right to any additional information. But at this stage in the game, her daughter was an adult, and she's been missing for 21 years. So that just annoys the living hell out of me. They want this woman's DNA, but they won't tell her anything? That's just ridiculous. Kathy decided that she and her husband, Ed, whom she calls Eddie, were going to do their own research. Kathy would find her herself. She asked Eddie to get on the computer and start searching websites for missing children with her daughter's birth date. The website he landed on was NAM-US. It didn't take but a few minutes, and boom, there she was. A missing girl with a birth date of June 23rd, 1974. She was the first missing person that came up when Eddie typed in the birth date. Immediately, he had seen a couple of pictures of the missing girl. The website even had her name, Aundria Michelle Bowman. The details: age when last known alive, 14. Race, white. Sex, female. Height, 65 inches. Weight, 115 pounds. And that she went missing in Hamilton, Michigan. I want to point out something here that is a little mind-blowing for me. Kathy had named her daughter Alexis Miranda Badger. Her adoptive parents named her Aundria Michelle Bowman. Both names have the same exact initials, A-M-B. And on the missing persons website, it said that Aundria may also go by the name of Alex or Alexis. Doesn't that just blow your mind? I just need to pause for a minute because that is kismet to me. While Kathy looked long and hard at the pictures of the girl named Aundria, she kept thinking to herself, I don't know this person. I mean, think about it. The last time she had seen her daughter, she was only 9 months old, and now she's looking at a 14-year-old. But the longer she looked, she was drawn to her eyes. She had also had Kathy's nose. The more she looked, something clicked. This was her daughter. Next, Kathy started scrubbing the internet, but she couldn't find anything on her daughter and couldn't find anything about the adoptive parents either. Next, she went to Facebook, thinking her daughter certainly had friends that may have also been looking for her. So she created a Facebook page called Find Aundria M. Bowman. She typed in, "Hi members. If any of you were close friends with Aundria, we'd love to hear from you. Please drop us a line via private message." And it didn't take long for her private messages to fill up. One message she received was from a relative of Aundria's named Sue Engweiler. She told Kathy that Aundria was adopted by Brenda and Dennis Bowman. Brenda Bowman is related to Sue as she is the cousin of Sue's husband, Craig. They had all gone to school together, and in high school, I believe it may have been their senior year when Brenda and Dennis started dating. Dennis was Brenda's first boyfriend, her first everything. After high school, Dennis had joined the Navy. Dennis wanted to marry Brenda after he came home from boot camp. He said he knew Brenda was the one as soon as he had met her. They were married in 1971. Dennis was stationed in San Diego, so the two of them lived there for about a half a year. But after that, he was able to choose where he would be stationed next. So Dennis chose Norfolk, Virginia. They had moved to Norfolk and were trying to start a family, but they were not having any luck. According to Brenda in the documentary on a recording, she stated that she was told she had a double uterus, whatever the hell that means, and said that she would probably never be able to have children of her own. Their best chance of having a family would be through adoption. Now, I had to put the brakes on here. Double uterus? I've never heard of that before.
I've never heard of such a thing. Did you look that up at all?
I looked it up because I'm like, what? What is this?
I was actually thinking perhaps she meant tilted uterus. Because back in the day, they used to tell a lot of women that they had a tilted uterus and that pregnancy wasn't likely. So perhaps that was just like a little error and they didn't cross-check that's not a thing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think double uterus is a thing.
But it actually is. It is a thing.
It is.
It's a thing. So listen to this. So I looked it up. I went to the Mayo Clinic's website, and there it was. And now that I'm educated, I'm going to pay it forward to you. So, quote, "A double uterus is a rare condition that is preset at birth in some women. In a female fetus, the uterus starts out as 2 small tubes. As the fetus grows, the tubes join to create one larger hollow organ, which is the uterus. Sometimes the tubes don't join completely. Instead, each one develops into a separate organ. A double uterus may have one opening into the vagina, and this opening is called the cervix. In other cases, each uterus has its own cervix." Now think about that. 2 uteruses and 2 cervixes. Isn't that crazy?
That's crazy.
Yeah, I know. I was like, wow, this is such a thing. Now, often there is a thin wall of tissue that runs down the length of the vagina, and this divides the vagina in two with 2 separate openings. Now, women who have a double uterus often have successful pregnancies, but the condition can make you more likely to have a miscarriage or a premature birth. Huh, how about that? I learned a thing or two about a thing or two.
Yeah, I didn't look it up. I just kind of assumed that they meant tilted uterus and moved on.
All right, so Brenda and Dennis decided that they would adopt as Brenda was not able to get pregnant. So they paid a visit to the adoption agency in Norfolk and did all the necessary paperwork. Now, they would just have to wait. But they didn't have to wait long before their phone rang. It was the adoption agency. Brenda was told, "It's your lucky day. We have a baby for you," and she's 6 months old. They were so excited. The following day, they received another call from the agency. They had made a mistake on the age of the baby. She wasn't 6 months old. She was actually 10 months old. It was Kathy's baby they were getting. Before long, the family decided to move back to their old stomping grounds in Michigan. Hamilton is on the western side of the Mitten. It's a small, sleepy town which is close to Holland. Basically, Hamilton had a gas station, a grocery store, and a lot of churches. Everyone in the town attended church. If you didn't, you just didn't fit in. Both Dennis and Brenda not only attended church, but they were also both Sunday school teachers. Aundria was 13 years old and in high school when Brenda started feeling nauseated in the mornings. She took a pregnancy test, and guess what? She's frickin' pregnant. I guess miracles do happen after all.
I just want to say, when I was watching the documentary, I was struck with a question in my brain. Just because when you're watching it, they're leading into things just like you're leading into things. You don't know what happens yet, but you know something's fishy. And you know this girl went missing, and you know that she had some struggles or whatever, regular teenage angsty kind of things, and at least that's what they lead you to believe. And then when they said that, lo and behold, here is Aundria. She's 13-ish, I think, when the baby was born. Immediately thought to myself, oh, Lord, are they going to find out that this is Aundria's baby and the mother planned it out that she was just going to say that it was her baby? I was struck with that, and I'm still left with that. They didn't talk about that any further, but I'm still like, did anybody ever DNA the second daughter? Like, I just want to know.
Mm-hmm, right.
I just want to know if this is actually her kid.
Right, and after you and I talked about that, and Nina as well, I kept thinking it was possible, but none of the friends that that Kathy had met with of Aundria's, none of them ever said she was pregnant. It was just like one day she was there, the next day she was gone. So I was like, huh.
Right, exactly. But my personal experience, I went to school with, I want to tell you, at least 5 girls throughout my childhood when I was in high school. 5 girls that had babies all of a sudden. Like, nobody ever knew they were pregnant, and the next thing you knew, they had a kid.
Right, but here...
Totally possible.
Agreed, and same thing in my high school. There were a couple girls that, kind of did the same thing. They were just gone. But at the time of Aundria's disappearance, that little baby, her sister was already born. And her friends knew of the baby. So I really, truly, in my heart of hearts, I don't think Aundria was pregnant.
Right, but the thing is she was already gone, but that doesn't mean that she didn't have the baby. Because they did go into how much Aundria loved the baby and how much she took care of the baby. Mm-hmm. And how some people were shocked that she would have just taken off and run away without her baby sister. Like, they did mention that. And that intrigues me. I still, to this moment, even though I watched the documentary, I'm listening to you talk, and I still am struck with, that's still a question mark for me. So mm-hmm. I'm just throwing it out there. I am still curious. Yeah.
Well, I can't say that you're wrong. Right, we can only both just hypothesize about it.
Yeah.
Right? All right.
Yeah, and throw it out there. Maybe, I don't know, maybe the biological mom ends up hearing our podcast one day, and a light bulb goes off, and she's like, wait a minute, do I have a granddaughter?
I'm going to go get that baby. Now, in the docuseries, friends of Aundria's were interviewed. They said that Aundria was a friendly girl and that she was always trying to fit into any and all of the cliques at school. Her friends said that she was just a normal teenager. Now, there was a recording of Dennis on the show, and he said that by the time Aundria became a tween, she all of a sudden was changing and that she would just run away. He also said that she was lying, taking drugs, and shoplifting. Again, via the recording of Dennis, he describes the night that Aundria went missing. Brenda was working the night shift, so Dennis, Brenda, and the baby loaded up in the car to take Brenda to work. Aundria had stayed at the house to do her homework. When Dennis returned, he said the front door was unlocked. He went upstairs to look for Aundria, but he didn't find her. Apparently, there was a lock on the parents' door, which he said was busted off the door frame. He noticed that $100 was missing from his dresser drawer, and so was one of the pieces of luggages from under their bed. Dennis said he called the police immediately and said, "Look, my kid's missing." An Allegan County sheriff had come to the Bowman residence to make a report. Dennis said that he would borrow a friend's car to go out and look for Aundria, and he did that because he didn't want Aundria to recognize their vehicle. Not only was Dennis out looking, but everyone was. There were some sightings that were reported, but there were no leads to go on, nothing that police could use to find her. One of her friends said that they heard that Aundria had gotten a ride from a trucker and left the state. Brenda would say that when she would get out of work, just before midnight every night, that she would drive the streets looking for her daughter, but she never saw her. One day, Dennis told Brenda that she just needed to stop. He said, quote, "You have a baby at home. You have got to stop." Kathy decided that she would reach out to an armchair sleuth to try to find her daughter. I mean, heck, she wasn't getting anywhere with the police, so why not give this a try, right? In 2010, Kathy had found a man in Torrance, California. His name was Carl Kopelman. He was an accountant by trade. He had gotten into sleuthing in 2009. He and others were utilizing a website called Web Sleuths, and on this site, it was basically an armchair sleuth that would log in, and they would see what they could do to locate and find any of these missing persons. But one thing that Carl noticed when on the Web Sleuth site is that the information just wasn't all that great. So with being an accountant, he decided that he would create a spreadsheet with all the missing persons' information to organize it. By the time he was done, he had 19,000 entries. Now, get this. Carl was able to solve quite a few missing person cases. I think that's amazing. It was Carl that was working on trying to solve the Jane Doe case in Racine, Wisconsin. You know, the woman that was found badly beaten and murdered into or next to a cornfield. Carl was working in a spreadsheet, and he plugged in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Illinois to see if anyone on his spreadsheet met those requirements. He also put in the birth year filter of 1970 to 1979. 13 cases populated from those filters. The second person on the list was the name Aundria Michelle Bowman. Carl was looking at a map of Michigan and Wisconsin, and he noticed that Racine, Wisconsin, and Holland, Michigan were basically straight across Lake Michigan from one another. When looking at the Jane Doe photo and the picture of Aundria, he thought that the two girls really resembled one another. So he called up the police department in Racine and said that he also had a missing person from the Holland, Michigan area, and perhaps she could be the Jane Doe they were looking for. Now, remember in the beginning of the show, I told you that, Kathy had been contacted by the adoption agency and they were requesting her DNA? Well, this is who the DNA was for. The Jane Doe and Racine, but Kathy's DNA didn't match. Kathy was relieved it wasn't her daughter, which gave her hope that she still may find her, and hopefully find her alive. The detective that was now working on the case for Aundria was Chris Haverdink. He had also gone to school with Aundria. He was 1 year ahead of her in school. He recalled that when Aundria went missing, he didn't even remember that there was any chatter about her at school. Either that she was missing or that she had run away. Just nothing. Chris was dedicated to solving this cold case, and Kathy could feel that he was in it and would work hard to solve it. A cold case team was formed. Along with Chris, working the case was Todd Workman and Brian Fuller. It was Todd who paid a visit to the residence of Brenda and Dennis. He explained that they had reopened their daughter's case. Well, I bet that made Dennis pucker. The cold case team also reached out to Kathy, which was refreshing to her, as when a few years prior, the police at the time were not willing to give her any information. They were aware that Kathy started a Facebook page and knew that she had reached out to Carl Kopelman as well. They knew she was going to do anything she could do to help find her missing daughter. Todd spoke with both Kathy and Carl and was very interested in learning everything he could from them that could help them. Kathy was full-time working on the Find Aundria Bowman page when she received a private message from a girl named Meta McLeod. The date of the message was May 11th, 2013. Quote, I just want to share with you that in September of 1989, I was abducted in Holland, Michigan at the Windmill gas station at the south side of Holland. I was 6 years old. I'm lucky to be alive. All these years I searched blogs about Aundria because I can't help but think our stories may be connected. Now, here is what happened to Meta. She had walked home from school. She asked her mother if she could walk to her friend's house, as both girls would walk to one another's house to play with one another all the time. Her mother initially told her no, but as most kids do, Meta wouldn't let up. So finally her mother caved and agreed to let her go. Now, all I can think about with that last sentence is the kids from Oakland County, the Oakland County child killer. Remember, the parents would say no, and they'd beg them. Ugh.
Yeah. Those are horrible moments.
Mm-hmm.
For every mom. Because when you relent and something horrible happens, that's exactly the fear of every mother.
Exactly. There was a reason they said no. They didn't know what the reason was, though, right? So Meta was instructed to call her mother when she got there. As Meta was near the Windmill gas station, that's when he saw her. A man pulled up to her in his red pickup truck. He said, quote, your mom said I could take you to go see some puppies that are in a barn. She said that he was close enough to her that he just grabbed her, pulled her in the truck. In her 6-year-old mind, she felt safe because he said he was a friend of her mom's. As they were driving down the road, she kept asking if they were getting close. She kept seeing barns as they were driving and asking if that was the barn where the puppies were. As they passed and came up to another barn, she asked if that was the barn. They had pulled up to a 4-way stop when the man saw a police car. He told Meta to duck. She said once they got through the stop, she sat back up. She went on to say that the man was stroking her hair, tucking it behind her ear, and talking nicely to her. But then his demeanor started to change. He pulled over on the side of the road, pulled out a rope from the back of the truck. He opened the passenger door and grabbed her by the back of the neck and pulled her out. He was taking her into the woods, and this is when she started screaming. He took off her clothes, tied her sweater around her mouth to keep her quiet. He sexually assaulted her. Then he had heard some dogs barking. Now, apparently there was a campground nearby. So he pulled up his pants and ran, leaving this poor little 6-year-old naked and alone in the woods. She was able to untie herself and ran out into the road naked. While at the police department, they sat Meta down with a sketch artist. The sketch was run in the local newspaper with an article about the kidnapping and the sexual assault. But the man who did this to her was never brought to justice. God, that makes me sick. Now, a woman, Meta, wanted to catch the man who kidnapped and assaulted her. She didn't want what happened to her to happen to anyone else. This is when Meta had come across the Facebook page for Aundria and sent a PM to Kathy. What really struck Meta is that Aundria went missing in March of 1989, and Meta was abducted that September, and the two of them are relatively close to the same area in Michigan. As Meta was doing her research on Aundria, she happened to come across a family photo of Dennis, Brenda, and Aundria when she was just a little girl. She was like, oh my God, he looks exactly like the man that abducted me. Of course, Meta shared all of this information with Kathy. Now, can you say mind blown? It's crazy. So Kathy shared all that she had just learned with Carl. Meta also told Kathy that the man who had abducted her, she said he smelled dirty. She described the odor. She said he smelled like paint or fuel. Now, come to find out, Dennis worked at the Makatawa Harbor installing carpets on yachts. The harbor was not too far away from where he had abducted Meta. When they were looking at the map, Meta said that now, of course, looking back, she was being driven past the Bowman's residence and the campground, which was just south of his home. Carl now wanted to see if he could find out if Dennis owned a red pickup truck that Meta had described. He had got in touch with one of Dennis's relatives, and they said that Dennis did have an old red pickup truck at one point, and the cherry on top was that the relative sent Carl a picture of the truck. Now, that's just crazy. When Meta looked at it, she said that it was very similar to the truck she was abducted in. When Meta heard Dennis's voice on a tape recording, she said it sent chills down her spine. That was the man.
Did anything, I don't remember him getting charged with any of that.
He didn't at the time. I don't think he ever did get charged with this because other things were going to unfold. But, it's a twist of fate that this, now woman, she was 6 years old when it happened, she is key here, right? She's the one who actually, was able to identify that it was Dennis. And that just helped Kathy to know that, yep, I'm on the right guy, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah, at least it highlighted him that he was attacking children, young girls.
Yes, exactly. Now, Kathy knew that she had to get to Michigan from Gloucester, Massachusetts. Her very first time driving up to Michigan was in 2013. Kathy and Eddie would make many trips to the Mitten over the years. On one visit, Kathy and Carl paid a visit to a couple in White Cloud, Michigan. The couple were related to Brenda Bowman. They were cousins, and their names were Sue and Craig Engweiler. Carl had asked Sue to describe a particular visit she had with Aundria, Brenda, and Dennis. She described Aundria sitting in front of their fireplace. She was not facing anyone, running her fingers through her hair. She seemed withdrawn. Brenda had walked up to Sue and said, quote, "Did you hear what the kid did? Do you want me to tell you what the kid did?" Dennis was also standing in the room. Now, this just broke Sue's heart because she was like, Andrea's not acting the way Aundria always acted before. Something was different. While in Michigan, Kathy and Eddie visited some friends of Aundria's. Michelle Timmer told Kathy that she and Aundria had ridden the bus home from school. They walked to Aundria's house, but when they got to the door, Andrea told Michelle to wait outside. When Aundria walked into her house, she said that Dennis had started to chase Aundria while he was yelling and screaming at her. As Aundria was running from Dennis, somehow he got a hold of her foot and tripped her. When Michelle looked into the house, she couldn't see them anymore, but she could hear them yelling and screaming. It sounded like they were in the second story. Michelle left, and when she saw Aundria at school and asked her what happened, she said when she was upstairs that her dad was yelling and hitting her because he said she was late getting home from school, but her friends said that they weren't late. The other friend that was sitting there with Michelle and Kathy described a night that she was at Aundria's where they were all sitting at the dinner table. She said, quote, "We were all sitting there. Her parents were eating hamburgers, but we were only allowed what her parents called a leftover sandwich, which consisted of ketchup, mustard, and relish on 2 pieces of bread." While at the dinner table, Aundria made the comment to her friend that this was all she was allowed to eat. Well, right then, Dennis flew across the table and hit Aundria so hard that she almost fell out of her chair. Brenda witnessed all of it, but did nothing, said nothing. She just kept feeding the baby as if nothing happened. Another friend that spoke with Kathy said that Aundria had enough and decided that she would go home on the bus with her friend. The parents of the friend were not home, so Aundria stayed in her friend's room for a few days, hiding from Brenda and Dennis. Her friend would sneak food up to Aundria while she was there. Aundria had confided in her that her dad would come up to her room in the middle of the night and make her do sexual acts with him. Her friend didn't know what to do with this information, so the 2 girls decided that the next day at school they needed to tell someone. They went to the principal's office and told what was happening, but nothing came of it. Aundria had even told Brenda that, quote, "Daddy had molested me," and Brenda responded with, "That's a lie," and put Aundria in counseling. But guess what? It wasn't with a real counselor. It was with a minister at their family's church. So here they all sit, the minister, Aundria, Dennis, and Brenda. In front of her parents, the minister asked, "Do you have something to say?" Then she said, "Yeah, I lied." The minister then said, "Do you realize what kind of allegation like this could do to your dad?" These statements were from a recording of Brenda. This poor girl was trying to tell the truth, but no matter what, no one would believe her. Andrea's friend would encourage her to leave, but they said she wouldn't leave her baby sister. She would tell them, "No, I have to take care of baby Vanessa."
You see what I'm saying right there? Why was this 14-year-old so enthralled with taking care of the baby? That intrigues me. I'm sorry. I can't let go of that one.
Well, the other side of that coin, too, I'm thinking is I believe that Aundria was probably always getting molested. This guy kidnapped and sexually assaulted a 6-year-old. So why wouldn't he do that to Aundria? So maybe, right, two theories. One, Aundria had the baby. Two, she didn't want to leave the baby because maybe she wanted to protect her because she knew what a monster her dad was.
Yeah, I get that too. I do. I just coupled with, the double uterus and 13 years later thing.
Yeah.
And then the fact that it was all boiling to a head, like there had to be more drama. I don't know. I just can't let go of that. I just feel like this baby was her baby. But besides that, I also am very intrigued that nowhere, anywhere does it say anything about Vanessa being abused.
No, it doesn't.
Which I find that interesting because he obviously has a track record, but 20 years go by, so he raised Vanessa.
Sue, the cousin of Brenda, said that when Aundria, air quotes, ran away, Brenda had called her and that Brenda never mentioned anything about Aundria taking the $100. When Sue was pushing for more information, she asked Brenda if Aundria had taken anything with her. She asked if she took clothes. Did she take her purse? Brenda said no. She didn't take anything with her. No purse, no makeup, no money, nothing. When Sue asked Brenda how Dennis was feeling about the situation, Brenda told her that she couldn't talk to Denny about it because it would just cause a fight. The way Dennis was acting about the whole thing did not set right with Sue. In fact, she placed an anonymous call to the police and said that they really needed to take a closer look at Dennis Bowman. So here his cousin is already feeling it like, nope, something's not right with him. It's him. Meanwhile, Kathy continued to dig and search. She wanted all the information she could get on Dennis Bowman. Carl had told Kathy about the Freedom of Information Act. It's a law. And once you submit a form along with a fee, you will be sent every legal document that they have on the person you are looking for. Well, Kathy wanted information on Dennis Bowman. And boy, oh boy, did she get it. She had received information on 2 cases that involved Dennis. One was from a B&E, which is breaking and entering and stalking of a coworker. When he was caught, they had searched his home and found a duffel bag. In it were the woman's lingerie, a mask, and a sawed-off shotgun. He served a year in county for that. The other one was a violent case in May 23rd of 1980. So remember, Aundria did not go missing until 1989. At the time, Dennis was 31 years old in May of 1980. The girl was just a teenager. She was riding her bike on Lakeshore Drive in Holland. And I've been on that road. According to court records, an attorney had asked the girl, quote, "What's the first thing that happened?" She replied, "He said, pull over, get off your bike, and start heading toward the woods." It's got a little MO going on there. Then I saw the gun. He yelled at me again and fired the gun past me. He said, "God damn it, get off your bike and start heading toward the woods." He then shot the gun again toward my foot, and I saw dirt fly. He told me he was going to blow a hole right through me, and he was pointing the gun at me. I turned around, and I saw a pickup truck heading south. So I waved my arms and tried to make the person that was driving stop, and I threw my bike in the back of the truck. The woman that was driving the truck opened the door and let me in. When Dennis was caught, He told the police that they had to let him go because, he had to pick up his daughter from school. At the conclusion of his trial, the judge said, quote, "We concluded that he is a danger to women if he is not confined." Dennis was sentenced to 5 to 10 years on February 2nd, 1981. At the time of this crime, Aundria was 6 years old. Dennis was released from prison on January 31st, 1986. Aundria was 11. So he got the minimum sentence just shy of 5 years, which is ridiculous. So in 2013, Kathy and Carl arrived at the Missing in Michigan meeting. Kathy had arrived, but they were a little late. When they walked in, they saw a circle of people in their chairs. And there was a woman sitting there, and Kathy knew who she was. It was Brenda. On a recording, Brenda said that she had a feeling that Kathy would be at the Missing in Michigan gathering. Brenda had taken a notebook along with pictures of Aundria. When it was her turn to speak, Brenda said, "Today, Aundria has 2 mothers here." She also said, "I want to thank you, Kathy, for coming." Can you believe this woman? Kathy had hopped to her feet, pointed at Brenda, and yelled, "You tell these people who your husband is." Kathy was so overcome with anger that she just couldn't speak. All she could do was yell at this woman, and then she walked out. Brenda was appalled that she was yelled at in front of the group. She walked up to the stage with the other parents when it was time and lit a candle for Aundria and made the comment that Kathy couldn't even do that for her daughter. Like, who's the best mom here? Kathy and Carl decided that the 2 of them would visit the 2 homes where Dennis and Brenda had lived. She was hell-bent on proving that Dennis had killed her daughter because she knew in her core that he had. The first home that Aundria had grown up in was no longer standing. For whatever reason, the home was torn down after the family moved out. This was the home that they were living in when they reported Aundria missing. I also want to point out that the friend of Aundria's that Kathy had been talking to had told her when Aundria had gone missing that they had never even seen any posters around town that she was missing and being looked for. When Kathy started searching for her daughter, that was the first time they'd seen any posters about Aundria, as Kathy was the one who plastered them everywhere. Next, Kathy and Carl located the home that Brenda and Dennis were currently living in. They pulled over on the side of the road and launched a drone over the home and the backyard. Kathy just had a feeling that her daughter was buried in their backyard. She was also looking at pictures from Google Earth as well, and when she did, something in the far back of the yard caught her attention. Carl seemed to think that Aundria was buried in the backyard in the tree line at the old property, but it was Kathy that was adamant. Her daughter was buried in the backyard of the Bowman's current residence. So Kathy approached the cold case team and was pushing for a search warrant of the Bowman property, but they told her that they just can't issue a search warrant without probable cause. Undeterred, Kathy found a billboard close to the Bowman residence, so she paid for an advertisement that said "Unsolved and Missing," all caps, and it also posted a reward of $11,000. The billboard also contained the last school picture of Aundria, along with an age progression image to the right of it. Hell hath no fury like a mother looking for her child. Kathy was even posting on Dennis's Facebook, leaving messages like, quote, "Don't think I'm going to look away. Karma is going to get ya." Kathy would also call the Bowman home. They would never answer the phone, so when the answering machine picked up, Kathy, no holds barred, would say what she wanted to say until the time ran out on the tape. So she would call back over and over and over, filling up the answering machine. Kathy was working on her Facebook page early one morning when her phone rang. It was Meta, and she had something very important to tell her. She said they got him. She had gotten a message on Facebook from a friend that lived next to the Bowmans. She said there were cops all over the place. Dennis was being arrested. But it wasn't for Aundria. It was a murder committed in Norfolk, Virginia in 1980. Brenda was brought into the police department and notified that her husband was being indicted for murder and rape in 1980. The woman he murdered was Kathleen Doyle. She was 25 years old. Kathleen was married to a Navy pilot. He was, at the time of the crime, deployed on September 9th, 1980. That night, Kathleen and her friend were hanging out at her home, just talking and sharing a bottle of wine. It was close to 11 p.m. when her friend left for home. But the following day, when her friend called to speak with her, there was no answer, and this concerned her. So she and her husband drove over to check on Kathleen. The front door was open. She saw the wine glasses still sitting on the table where they had left them, which she found odd. Sounds like it would be unusual for Kathleen to not pick them up. When Vivian moved on to Kathleen's bedroom, she opened the door to find a horrible scene. Kathleen was naked, brutally beaten, stabbed, burned, strangled, and raped. In the trash can in Kathleen's bedroom, police found a Lincoln log that had a burned end on it. Kathleen didn't have any children, so there was no reason why this should be in her home. When they looked at Kathleen's face, the burn mark on her face was the same shape as the end of that burnt Lincoln log. When police went through the home, there were only fingerprints found from Kathleen, her husband, and her friend Vivian. Brenda was hot mad. She said that they were living in Michigan in 1980, so there is no way Dennis could have done this. She was getting an attorney. It was August of 2018 when Detective John Smith of the Norfolk Cold Case Unit was assigned to Kathleen's case. There was semen found on the bedspread and semen recovered from Kathleen's body. Now that DNA is a thing, they sent in samples of the semen for testing. Now they just needed to find out who the semen came from. In December of 2019, John had attended a regional homicide investigators conference, which was held that year in Norfolk. Detective Smith had taken a list that contained names of 31 potential relatives that can either be the suspect or a family member of the suspect. And guess whose name was at the bottom of that list? Yep, Dennis Bowman. When Detective John Smith started looking into Dennis, he uncovered all the bullshit that he'd been up to. Now, if you want to talk of kismet, here's one for you. At the conference in Norfolk, John ran into a detective from Michigan. That detective was Brian Fuller. He was on the cold case team for Aundria. See? I told you. Kismet. When John approached Brian, he told him about the case he was working on and that one of the men on the list was from Michigan. Brian asked for the name of the man from Michigan, and when he heard the name Dennis Bowman, he said, "Yeah, I know him. I know his family, and this is probably your guy." For the rest of the conference, these two detectives were strategizing their next steps. Now, let's get back to September 9th, 1980. Remember I said that Brenda mentioned they were living in Michigan at the time and that there was no way her husband could have committed this crime? Well, Detective Smith was going over some court transcripts for the attempted murder of the girl that was riding her bike. So remember, this was the girl on her bike Dennis shot at when she wasn't getting off of her bike and heading toward the woods like he commanded her to do. It's that court case. So as John was reading, he came across a few lines that were significant. Mr. Potsonik, who was the attorney for Dennis, was asked by the judge if his client was on his way to the hearing or was he going to be here. Mr. Potsonik replied, quote, "My client is not here. He is away on his 2-week summer camp requirement for the Navy." And guess where that was? Norfolk, Virginia. That transcript was dated September 16th, 1980. All John needed now was a DNA sample from Dennis. The Bowmans were in communication with the sheriff's department to discuss the harassment they were getting from Kathy. So while they were there complaining about her, the detectives offered Brenda and Dennis something to drink. Boom. Gotcha. They had a match. So John headed to the prison where Dennis was. He did not identify himself as a detective. John was there to win his trust. He would get Dennis food, coffee, whatever it was he asked for. Dennis was letting down his guard after a handful of visits with John. On one visit, John was running his mouth, and John just let him go. Dennis brought up the 2-week reserve in Norfolk. He said, I'm 600 miles away from anybody I know, and I'm wound up like an 8-day clock. So after about a week and a half, I said, fuck it. I've got to get off this ship. Then I went out. I wandered around, and I walked into a little bar, and I sat down, and I ordered a double bourbon and Coke. Well, I got stupid drunk. Just crazy drunk. It's dark. I didn't know where I was, and I'm walking down the street, and I walked past this house. All the lights were out. There's no car in the drive. And I said, I wonder if they got some loose money laying around. So I went to the back of the house, and I went up to the window, and the window had a hook and latch on it to lock it. So I pulled out my pocket knife, opened up the window. I almost fell in the house. I was just drunk. I went into the house, and it's the living room. I'm looking for money. I went to the kitchen, and I looked in the cookie jar. Nothing there. And there was another door, but when I opened the door, she sat up and started to scream. And I covered her mouth with my left hand. I went to push her back with my right. I still had that little penknife in my hand. And when I went to push her back down, she grabbed that hand, and it went right here as he pointed just below his heart. He's making her out to be that it's her fault that she was stabbed. I love it. Dennis said that she was still sitting up on her bed when he said, "Lady, I'm leaving." And then he walked out of the front door. So Dennis basically told John that, quote, it was the demon. Dennis's body language changed, his voice became softer, and he picked up a pen and started to draw himself and the demon. Dennis said that the demon is trying to get out of his body, but he won't let it. When John asked Dennis if he remembered having sex with that woman, he didn't deny that he did. He just kept saying that he doesn't remember, or that he just can't see it in his mind. Dennis said, I just keep seeing her stomach. John said, okay, then she must have been naked. Dennis denied that. He kept to his story that she was only stabbed once. But the truth is, Kathleen was stabbed numerous times in the chest, stomach, and back. She had an electrical cord tied around her neck and a gag of clothes that were shoved in her mouth. And oh, let's not forget the burn mark on her cheek from the Lincoln log. Now at this point, John got up and walked out of the room. Dennis just kept saying, I didn't do that. I didn't do that. Then he kind of sat back and relaxed a little and said, I've done it again. I've done it again. When John came back into the room, handcuffs were put back on Dennis. He was led back to his cell. Brenda was notified of the conversation that had occurred, and she was all tearful and was still hopeful that her husband didn't kill Aundria. Brenda would call Dennis in prison. She continued to tell him that she loved him and she would continue to stand by her man. Now that she knew he killed Kathleen in Virginia, she said to Dennis, I can't move to Virginia to visit you. You need to stay in Michigan. So the cold case detectives were working a deal. They were trying to get Dennis to tell them what had happened to Aundria and where her body was. If he would do that, they told him that they would keep him in Michigan, which would allow Brenda and their daughter to still visit him. They were all he had left. Back at the Bowman ranch, detectives were there with ground-penetrating ultrasound looking for Aundria, but they came up with nothing. Dennis said he wanted to have a face-to-face with Brenda, which is kind of unusual, but the detectives arranged it. When Brenda sat down with him, he tearfully told her that he accidentally killed Aundria. He said, quote, Aundria's dead. She's been dead from the start. I came home with the baby, and the baby was sleeping. I laid her down on the couch and went upstairs. He said Aundria was walking out of their bedroom. She said she was leaving. I said, no, you're not. She said she would tell the counselor that he molested her. He said, no, you won't, and he hit her. She fell down the stairs. When I got down to her, she didn't have a pulse. So I wrapped her up in a blanket and hid her body in the barn and called the police to report her missing. She stayed there for a few days before Dennis tried to put her in a barrel. She didn't fit. Dennis went on to tell Brenda, I had to cut off her legs to get her in the barrel. Then on trash day, after the neighbors put their trash out and left the house, I then put the barrel out next to their trash, and then she was gone. During this confession to Brenda, it looked like he was crying, but I didn't see any tears. Now, one thing here with the story, Christine, that really doesn't make any sense to me. She falls down the stairs, and by the time he flew down the stairs, she already didn't have a pulse? That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, no, none of it makes any sense. That whole story is completely fictitious. I think that that was a knockdown, drag out, and I think she was finally learning that she wasn't going to take it anymore, and she was fighting back for her life. And he beat the bejesus out of her, and she was probably dead, and then he threw her down the stairs. And the only reason why, I mean, you didn't even get to everything else that happened yet, so I don't want to get ahead of myself. But there's more to let you know that it was so egregious. Because if she just fell down the stairs, why wouldn't he have called 911?
Exactly.
Why wouldn't he have told anybody? The reason why he couldn't tell anybody is because it was obvious that falling down the stairs was not the reason that she died.
And I'm not even certain she fell down the stairs. He probably raped, beat, choked.
Made up as well. You're right.
Yep, that could have just been a whole part of that fabrication. Oh, she broke her neck. Sorry, dude, you don't just hot die like right now. Everything stops when you break your neck. Sorry, that doesn't happen. During his incarceration for Kathleen, Dennis would write to Brenda, and every single letter was intercepted and read by the police. Here's one. December 12th, 2019. Dearest love, I want you to know something between you and me. Just us. Aundria did fall. She did break her neck. And I did hide her body. But I did not throw her body in the trash. I placed her body in a proper grave next to a private graveyard. She was wearing jeans and her favorite sweater. She was wearing a gold necklace with a heart and cross on it. I wrapped her in a clean white sheet, neat and tight like a mummy. I also wrapped her hands and feet with a red ribbon. She liked that color. Then I placed her in a new 6-foot by 8-foot silver tarp, sprinkled cedar chips, cloves, and pieces of cinnamon between the sheet and the tarp. Then filled in the grave, watered down the dirt. 2 weeks later, you could almost see where it was. 2 months later, you couldn't. In 30 years, I have passed her more than 100 times. I'm sure she's with God. Now, you say you don't know the truth? The truth is I love you. I love Vanessa, and I loved Aundria. You've known me for 50 years, and you say you don't know me anymore? Well, then, you'll have to make up your own mind. I will never forget you. I have you forever carved on my heart. Denny. But guess what? The detectives couldn't find Aundria in any cemetery. When they confronted Denny about this, he said, I'm the person that's going to keep that for the rest of my life. You controlling piece of shit. He's going to hold that to his vest. It's his last card, so he's going to continue to use it to get out of his cell for a minute and play games with the police. So now it was time to work the Brenda angle, and that's what they did. Guess what? It worked. Detectives and Dennis know that there have been multiple stories. They told Dennis that he has gotten Brenda involved in this. They told him that he has gotten her wrapped into this, and that causes a problem for Brenda. They told Brenda that Dennis owes her the truth, so she called him in prison. She said, quote, the prosecutor will not charge without a body. If it came to the time for him to tell her what she needs to know, he would be able to stay in Michigan for life, which would allow him to have visits. If you go down to Norfolk to serve your time for what you did to Kathleen Doyle, I'm not going to see you, like at all. On another call Brenda placed to Dennis, through tears she said, I can't pull myself together. I have dreams of it. Dennis said in a snarky voice, dreams of what? Brenda replied loudly, Aundria, you, everything. Another call. Brenda said, quote, I still want closure with knowing where she is. I want our baby girl home with me in a very pretty urn. Then I can finally realize that she's home where she belongs after all these years she's been gone. Dennis said, quote, the only help we'll get from now on is from God. Now, he said this after he told her to get over it. She actually raised her voice and said, I can't get over it. I've tried to explain that to you. On another call from Brenda, she said, I don't care anymore, Denny. One way or another, whatever happened, I will still love you no matter what. There's a possibility we could have somewhat of a life here in Michigan. I want to hear you say you believe there's hope, he said. That's all we got. I believe you, honey. On another call, and this one is one that Detective John Smith was notified of, he was told that he needs to come and have a listen. Here's what was said on that call. Dennis said, I will tell you exactly where Aundria is. She's very close. Brenda, I hope so. Dennis, oh, she is. Brenda, Aundria is buried in our backyard. Brenda said, we didn't live here. We didn't even know this place. Dennis said, Brenda, she's there. Where we were at the old house, I had the barrel buried. When we found out we were moving, I took the barrel over to our new house. I dug the hole, and I put the barrel in it, all right? Then I covered it all up. She's been there the whole time. Now you know. So detectives hired an excavation and anthropology team to dig up this spot in the back of the Bowman property. Want to guess where they focused on? Yep, that odd mound. The one that Kathy said, that's where she's buried. She was right. As the bucket on the bulldozer gently pulled back yards and yards of dirt, as gently as it could, all of a sudden the crane operator was halted. They saw something just there to the far left. When they looked at it, it looked to be a rusted ring of a barrel. This is when the anthropologists, with all their tools, gently started working through the soil. They had found bags and bones. Brenda was not only home, but she was also standing right there at the dig site. On a recording, Brenda clearly was tearful. She was being walked back to the house at the property when they found the bones. She said to the detective walking her back to the house, quote, they weren't saying exactly that it was Aundria. They just said they found remains. And after I stood over for a few minutes, I turned, and Todd walked me back to the house. And all I could say to him was, he didn't lie to me this time. He didn't lie, Todd. Aundria's remains were found in 4 different bags inside what was left of a barrel. Dennis placed those bags inside a trash bag of diapers. Now, I want to clarify here, these were dirty diapers. Not just diapers that he grabbed to fill the bag. They were dirty, pissy, poopy diapers. There was also a peppermint patty wrapper that was also found in those bags. The date on the wrapper, 1989, the year that Dennis reported Aundria missing. On another call to Dennis, Brenda said, how was the letter that you wrote so convincing about the cemetery? Dennis said, that was more bullshit for them, and I thought it would make you feel better. But you haven't felt better. You've only been bitching about how you wanted her right there with ya, in a can, sitting on a shelf. I thought maybe if you thought she was buried decently, properly, with respect, then maybe you'd say, okay, that was enough. But no, Brenda said, I don't want you to be mad. And he said, at least you'll have her in a tin jar on your shelf. So now, here I am. Now you know I'm a rotten, stinking son of a bitch. Brenda said, nothing's changed. I still love you. Then the automated time limit reminder fired off, but the line was quiet. Denny, did you hear me? Yes, I heard you. It's going to be over, baby. Bye-bye. Now that they had something detectives needed to be sure this was Aundria, they could take samples from the remains, and they already had Kathy's when she submitted her DNA for the Jane Doe in Racine, Wisconsin. The sample, when compared, confirmed that between the skeletal remains and the DNA from Kathy, a daughter-mother relationship was confirmed. For years, Kathy pointed and yelled from the top of the mountain that her daughter was buried in Dennis's backyard. 4 years. She was right. Her maternal instinct was on point. She never wanted to put her daughter up for adoption. She was pressured by her mother to give her daughter the best life possible. What did she know? She was a 16-year-old girl learning life of a woman with a child. And to me, it doesn't sound like her mother was there for her. She just wanted to get rid of that baby. All that bullshit of them thinking she gave the baby up because she didn't want it was malarkey. She did what she thought was best. And if it wasn't for Kathy, this case would never have been solved. Now, I truly believe that there are more victims out there. I absolutely believe that. You don't just grab a 6-year-old, fire a gun at a young lady riding her bike, stalk and break into a woman's apartment, and murder and dismember your 14-year-old daughter and bury her in your backyard, not only once, but twice. This guy was in the Navy, stopping in different ports. So just like John Eric Armstrong, it was easy. You are not home. You're on a ship. You have the ability to disembark for a few hours, commit a crime because you're jacked up, and hop back on board, and off you go. There's more. I just know it. And guess who else feels that way? Kathy. I have a feeling she's going to keep searching for more victims. At sentencing, Kathy, of course, was in the audience. The chief circuit court judge was Margaret Zuzik Baker. She had been in this business for just about 40 years, and she said that she has never read anything this disturbing. Quote, I believe a sentence guideline that keeps you away from our community for a minimum of 35 years to 50 years is appropriate in this case. At sentencing, Dennis was given 2 life sentences, and his time will be served in Norfolk, Virginia, not Michigan. Kathleen's cousin said this, Dennis is superfluous to her story. Kathleen's story is about her life. She was our girl. She belonged to us. Don't let the person who did this awful thing be the person everybody remembers. Let them remember the young women who have died. Brenda had given the 2 detectives half of the ashes of Aundria after she had her remains cremated. And when detectives told Kathy what they had for her, she was angry. Half? Half of my daughter? But of course, she took them. Kathy said she felt like she became Aundria, a more angry, a more mature her, and that transformed her. It was like walking through fire. She needed to get through to the other side. How about that crazy story? That is just bananas.
Yeah, it is bananas. I'm still stuck on Vanessa might be Andrea's daughter.
You're not letting that go, damn it.
It's too much. It's just too much that within a year after the baby's death is when he quote unquote gets rid of Aundria. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. I think that the wife, I don't know. I guess I'm implying a lot here, and it's probably malicious to some extent on her behalf. However, I can only say what I feel, and what I feel is that the wife knew more than she ever let on. That she was well aware that her husband was a sicko. And I think that the baby was the reason why she covered up for him, because she got another baby out of it. And I think that that baby might have been Andrea's. And I think that it was kind of sick and very typical for abused women that are in toxic, abusive relationships, that like when they found the body and her word was, well, at least he didn't lie to me this time. He told me the truth this time, like as if that was love, because he told her the truth this time. So all the other times that he lied to her were forgiven, because this time he told me the truth.
Yeah.
I just think that she was equally as sick.
I absolutely agree with that. And, I think in the show it said they were married 48, 49 years, 47 years, something like that.
Because I think when he was getting arrested.
Yeah. Yeah. And, this guy was your one and only and this and that and the other thing. But what in the actual fuck? You would still forgive this man for killing and dismembering and burying your daughter? That's okay? Nothing in defense of her daughter?
The other one, while they were married for 8 years. That's what I'm saying. She knew more than she ever let on. She knew that he was a sicko. And I'm kind of likely to believe that he even told her about some of his exploits.
Could have.
Because she didn't seem very shocked.
Right.
She just didn't. She was like, oh, just being sad. You know what I mean? Like, this, I don't know. If somebody told me that my spouse was a murdering rapist, I think I'd be like, wait, what? She had no shock and awe. She was just sad. And it was about, woe is me kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
It was crazy to me. I did not believe her, not one bit.
Nope, I didn't either. And you can't tell me that you don't know that your husband's missing in bed. Where do you think he is? She knew he was molesting that girl.
He was out doing stupid shit.
Oh, he's out doing stupid shit, and he's in the bedroom raping his daughter.
Exactly. Yeah. That kind of crap doesn't happen. I don't know. I never believe anybody that says that all of that stuff happens under their nose without them knowing anything. Please.
Yeah.
I can't. I just can't with people like that.
Me too. Like, you don't feel something in your gut? I don't know. It infuriates me. It really does.
As crazy as this story is, I think it's even crazier with the fact that was actually Aundria's baby. That's it.
That's it, damn it.
That's it in a nutshell. I can't get over that. And I really feel like a few years from now, we might even, since this documentary came out, I'm thinking that other people will probably think that too. And maybe we'll find out something down the road. That they'll be like, oh my God, it was actually her kid. You know what I mean? I don't know. I'm waiting for that story to come out now.
It'll be interesting. It'll be interesting. And one thing I'll say is, there was a picture in the documentary where, Dennis, Brenda, Aundria, and baby were all in this picture together. The baby had black hair. Dennis had brown hair. His wife had blonde hair. Kathy, Aundria's birth mother, was a blonde. But Kathy had dark hair, right? So I'll give you that. There was a video of, it was maybe like a video call that Dennis was having with Brenda and their daughter. And the daughter, like, you could barely see her. It was like she was kind of sitting on her mom's lap. And her hair looked exactly like Brenda's hair now, like blondish, yellowy blonde. It was like a weird color.
That's dyed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so.
Dyed.
Yeah, who knows? You could be right. It could be Aundria's. Who knows? DNA that little girl, damn it. Crazy. All right, well, I think we should wrap it up. That was an amazing show. Thank you, Christine, and thanks to Nina for seeing this documentary and telling me about it. I never even heard of it, and it's just insane.
When me and Nina happened across it, was it on Netflix? I'm not even sure which streaming it was on.
Yep.
But Into the Fire, and we were like, oh my God, it's a Michigan crime story. We need to be talking about this.
Mm-hmm.
So we had to talk about it, especially because it's kind of like a little bit of a hot topic because it really just came out on Netflix, the documentary.
Yeah, this year, 2024.
I'm glad that our little podcast to have kind of a hot off the presses topic.
Absolutely. I love it. So thank you. And thank you, everyone, for coming back and listening. Have a great week. We look forward to seeing you back on Wednesday for Round Robin. Have a great week, everyone. Bye.
Bye.